It had not been a good year for Queensryche. Hell, it hadn't been a good decade and a half. Ever since their 1997 album Here in the Now Frontier, they'd found their popularity dwindling inexplicably. Where once they'd captivated packed stadiums with their outstanding virtuosity and cutting-edge theatrics, they now found themselves relegated to the Golden Oldies circuit, cranking out Eyes of a Stranger to 800-seat theaters with crowds well under capacity. A string of critical and commercial failures had left them confused and lost, with even the momentary success of Operation Mindcrime Part 2 not providing the staying power necessary to catapult them back to arena stardom. The band members, Michael Wilton, Eddie Jackson, Scott Rockenfeld, and some guy who wasn't Chris DeGarmo, knew that there was only one thing keeping Queensryche alive: their unyielding loyalty to the vision of the lead singer, Jeff Tate. Uncertain what to do after the critical and commercial failure of Dedicated to Chaos, their ironically titled exploration of soporific doldrums, the band assembled in the living room of Jeff Tate's lavish mansion to plan their next move. A hush fell over the room as Jeff Tate entered, drinking a glass of his signature Insania wine. He walked past them silently and stood at the window contemplating the clouds that drifted lazily over the Seattle skyline. Finally, after a prolonged instant, he turned to face his partners in Mindcrime. "I've realized that to save this band, I will have to make the ultimate sacrifice," said Tate, as he took another long, contemplative sip, his piercing gaze meeting each set of eyes in slow succession over the rim of his wine glass. "You're going to kill yourself?" blurted Michael Wilton, his tone betraying a sudden sense of hope. No, that wouldn't do it. If I killed myself, the focus would be on me. Nobody would care about Queensryche anymore because they'd be too downtrodden." "He's right," nodded Scott Rockenfeld. "He is, after all, the voice of Queensryche. He's the beam that supports the rest of this band. Without him, who will ever sing the soaring high notes on Queen of the Reich?" There was a moment of silence as they contemplated the enormity of Jeff Tate's contribution to Queensryche, which was second only to his contributions to the human race. Jeff could see in their distant contemplative eyes that they were all remembering the time he'd walked out on water to heal an injured swan by singing it an a cappella rendition of Jet City Woman. "I have decided," said Jeff Tate, his prophetic tone slicing the silence, "to become the most hated asshole in metal music." "But how will you do that?" asked Michael Wilton. "You're widely known to be one of the nicest, friendliest, most humble people in the history of humanity. You don't have the kind of ego that could make people hate you." "I've been studying the legends," replied Tate. "Axl Rose, Yngwie Malmsteen, William Shatner, you name it. And I think I know how to make this work. I'll act like such a pompous prick that it will only seem natural for you guys to throw me out of the band. Then when I'm gone, I'll parade around on the internet like I'm the only member of the band that matters. I'll even try to hold on to the band name and start a new Queensryche with a bunch of session players. I'll pick the most random, mismatched people imaginable. I'm thinking Bobby Blotzer on drums." "Bobby Blotzer playing progressive metal?" interjected Michael Wilton. "That's absurd." "Exactly, but don't worry. Bobby will quit almost immediately, along with anyone else who has any sense of shame or dignity. Those that remain will join me in the studio, where we'll deliver the most asinine, obnoxious letdown of an album ever put to tape. But not only that, we'll stifle any potential the record could have by rendering the mix in such a way that the whole thing sounds like one big flat slab of monorail fuzz. We'll have legendary shredders like Ty Tabor and Chris Poland come in and record blistering solos only to have them lost among one layer of tastelessly compressed rhythm guitar after another. The album will come out and meet with such negative reviews that the record label will be forced to issue remixed and remastered copies, costing them a small fortune. And the shows, oh, the shows. I'll go out on stage in a silver fedora and a silk bathrobe and thong underwear. I'll grab some poor fan's cell phone and throw it across the room. I'll make it a point to break every rule of basic human decency that's ever been observed by civilized society." "But where do we factor into all of this?" asked Scott Rockenfeld. "That's the best part. All this time, while I'm turning what's left of my career into a morbidly prolonged public bowel movement, you all will be taking it in stride and acting like the class act you are. You'll find a new singer who sounds exactly like me, proving to the fans that you can go on without my graceful leadership. The world will be so disgusted by my grotesque display that it will long for the glory days of Queensryche, and in so doing will get behind you, the one true Queensryche, in force. It will restart the band, and you'll put out a real Queensryche album, one that has all of the hallmarks of our best work, and it will wipe the slate clean. You can just play songs from the first 5 to 7 discs, and paradoxically, it won't seem like you're just coasting on past glories. Suddenly, those old hits will be infused with a new life and a new sense of urgency, and the fans will look forward excitedly to see what Queensryche has planned next. Remember what that was like? Remember the tangible excitement in the air between Empire and Promised Land, back when the world actually waited with bated breath to see what Queensryche had in store? It will be there again, finally. Queensryche, the real Queensryche, will be the superpower it once was. And what about you? Asked Eddie Jackson. Will you return to the band in 5 years for a glorious reunion? He seemed hopeful, but his face sank as Jeff shook his head. No, Eddie, I won't. If this plan works, and it will, I'll be too much of a pariah to come back to the band. Nobody will want to see or hear from me again. This is for you, not me. You'd do this for us? Asked Michael Wilton, his voice trembling. I have devoted my life to Queensryche, Jeff Tate explained. This will be the ultimate act of devotion. If this is what it takes to save this band, then I gladly give of myself. Eddie Jackson rose to his feet, his jaw clenched as a single translucent tear welled in his eye, catching the bittersweet warmth of the Seattle sun as it rolled down his cheek. "Oh, Captain, my Captain," he said, giving Jeff a sharp salute. The rest of the band members stood, following in suit. "Oh, Captain, my Captain," said Scott Rockenfeld. "Oh, Captain, my Captain," said Michael Wilton. "Oh, Captain, my Captain," said some guy who wasn't Chris DeGarmo. In the weeks that followed, Queensryche performed their seemingly suicidal charade perfectly. Jeff spit on his bandmates during shows and picked fights backstage. No longer were they playing to die-hard fans who sought a glimpse into the nostalgia of Queensryche's glory days. Now the audiences consisted of perplexed onlookers at the derailed train that was this once great band. Then, quietly and carefully, the instrumentalists of Queensryche, Michael Wilton, Eddie Jackson, Scott Rockenfeld, and some guy who wasn't Chris DeGarmo, found a singer named Todd Latour who sounded exactly like Jeff Tate back in the 80s. As they played small clubs with this new singer under a new name, they began to build the momentum. And when finally the floodgates came crashing open and Tate was fired from the band, the internet exploded in an uproar. Everything was going exactly as planned. Jeff Tate's Queensryche parody band released Frequency Unknown, its title spelled as an acronym on the cover, to appear as though he were mercilessly taunting his former bandmates. And as the hatred for Tate mounted, so the support for the real Queensryche took hold. The fans were passionate again and hungry for more. Tate watched as his former bandmates rose and thrived, and his heart swelled with pride at all they had accomplished. The real Queensryche was back, and that was all that mattered. Then, one night while he was on tour with his Queensryche parody band, Jeff Tate set up in his suite in the Super 8 in Cedar Fort, Utah, enjoying a glass of Insania red wine, when the floor began to rumble. Mirrors shattered and lamps smashed to bits as the floor opened up, revealing a mighty chasm that gazed down into the very fires of hell below. And up from that smoldering void rose Ronnie James Dio, the demonic glint in his eyes shimmering like a rainbow in the dark. "Ronnie!" gasped Jeff, dumbfounded. "Wait, how can this be?" "Behold, Jeff Tate," said Ronnie in a resonant voice that had been sorely missing from modern metal. "For your bold sacrifice, you have attained the title of Bodhisattva, the supreme enlightened being. Your courage and grace have inspired the metal gods to bestow eternal favor upon you. Forevermore you shall walk the earth in spirit form, spreading your message of love and compassion throughout humankind. But first, you must dine among the gods in Valhalla." Jeff was filled with a warm inner glow as he ascended into the air, his spirit leaving his body in a slow, majestic flourish, his soul floating towards a brilliant white light and the sound of an angelic choir singing silent lucidity. In this new transcendental state, he presided over all metal music, blessing it with the same brilliance and excellence he'd brought to the latter half of the Queensryche catalog.